Steve Chou and his wife started an online business so his wife could quit her job, but then Steve's own blog, appropriately named My Wife Quit Her Job, also became a success. In fact, both businesses did so well that they were making much more online than he did at his day job. So today we dive into why he stayed at his job as long as he did and what things are like now that he's quit and can focus on his family and multiple businesses. Welcome to the MapleMoney Show, the podcast that helps Canadians improve their personal finances to create lasting financial freedom. Did you know our sponsor, Wealthsimple, offers a free portfolio review? They'll review your investments, how much debt you have, and whether you're saving enough. Wealthsimple also helps you set goals and suggests ways to lower your fees and how much you pay in tax. Head over to maplemoney.com/wealthsimple today. Let's chat with Steve. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the Maple Money Show.
Hey, glad to be here, Tom.
So I wanted to talk to you today because I know dealing with you a lot in the past, there was a point where you were still working at your job and you were struggling with this kind of balance between really enjoying your work, but also wanting to improve your business. But before we get to that, let's go all the way back sort of to the beginning of all this. Your wife, Jen, she quit her job, which leads to the name of your blog. But can you tell me a bit about that, how that came about with your first business?
Yeah, I mean, the reason we started that first business, which was an e-commerce store selling handkerchiefs, is because, my wife wanted to stay at home with our kids. It was our first child, and we both kind of agreed that it made sense to have someone stay at home. Problem is, where we live, it pretty much requires two incomes to get like a good house and a good school district, because we were thinking long-term at that point. And at the time, my wife was making $100,000, and we just needed a way to replace her salary since she was staying at home.
Nice. So how did the idea come about for this business? One of the topics we like to talk about here is different ways to make money. And I know you have a pretty unique story on how that business started.
Yeah, it actually started when we got married, and my wife knew she was going to cry. And we spent all this money on photography, and she didn't want to use like ratty tissues to dry her tears. So we ended up looking all over the place for handkerchiefs, and we couldn't find anywhere in the US. And then we found this factory in China, and we ended up buying a whole bunch of them, used them for the wedding, and then we sold the rest on eBay, and they ended up selling like hotcakes. And so when it came time to start our business, we kind of got back in touch with that vendor and launched our store.
Great. So I believe she was able to replace her income the first year, right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
that was actually not the plan. It was we would have been happy with just $60,000, but it just kind of took off.
Great. So this then leads to sort of your aside from your help on that business, but your first sort of side hustle. You're still working at your job, and you started this blog, My Wife Quit Her Job. Can you tell me why you started that and how that sort of helped with income as well?
Yeah, so I started that after reading Steve Pavlina's blog. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he
I'm
wrote
not sure.
this. He wrote this one post. It was how to make your first love dollar. And at the time, he was making like $4,000 a day in AdSense. This is back in the heyday of AdSense.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I can do that. So I just started documenting my store on the blog, and it started gaining an audience. And I started making a little trickle of AdSense here and there, but I just kind of made it part of my routine and, just wrote once a week, and just things started to snowball over time.
Okay. Now, I know sort of the success of this blog kind of continued to increase, and you were still working. And just in our own private conversations, I know that you kind of had to struggle with that sort of balance between what you wanted to do going forward.
Oh, okay. So in terms of work, because we've known each other for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
I remember in the very beginning, the reason why I struggled was because I was trying to write every single day of the week in the very beginning of the blog while working a full-time job and helping out with the store. But once I dropped down to once a week writing, and writing on a blog these days is not a volume game; it's more about quality.
For sure.
It got a lot easier, and so I actually didn't struggle with the work-life balance once I dropped down to less writing.
Oh, okay. But you were also though sort of unsure maybe when you were ready to quit. I know.
Yeah.
I know we were talking about that for a while.
Yeah, we were. And I actually never wanted to quit. Mainly because I worked at a high tech job and I was working with a whole bunch of smart people smarter than myself. They all had like PhDs from MIT, Princeton, Stanford. And I just really liked the idea of working on a project on a team. And I struggled with quitting because I didn't want to quit. And ultimately, I had a sweet deal towards the end where I was just working 2 days a week and I negotiated where I could work on my own stuff at work. And that arrangement was really ideal because I had the best of both worlds. But yeah, if it weren't for a few things that happened in my company, I might actually still be working today, even though my side hustles make like 10x more than what I was making at the day job.
Well, that's what I've always found interesting is that you've made so much more on these supposed side hustles, but they're so much more than your day job at the time. So yeah, so you obviously liked still working there, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, my story isn't the standard. Like my wife, she actually did not like her job.
Okay.
And so we needed to get her out of there real quick. And then the business was a good solution for that. For me, I was just trying to make some side money with the blog, which it ended up blowing up after 3 years, I would say. It took a while for it to blow up, but it ended up doing that. And I had no intention of ever actually quitting my job, really.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of bloggers start out that way. It's half hobby, half side income, and it's not normally the plan. Maybe more nowadays. I think a lot of people want to start a blog just so they can quit their job.
I don't know if the blog is the right way to go.
No.
Yeah, because it takes a long time. You got to be really, really patient. And since every company is doing content marketing these days, I'd say it's a lot harder today.
Yeah, we had an episode already with Philip Taylor, and he said of all the different ways we kind of covered that people could make money, blogging's kind of one of the worst. Like even back in the day, just like me, like you could go months, half a year, even up to a year for some people without making a dollar. So it's not something you can just hop into and make money.
I will say this though, once it does take off, I think it has a lot of staying power. Like
Mm.
once you have like an audience and a fan base, it gets a lot easier. You just have to get over that really hard first hump.
Yeah, you have to truly do it on passion before you
Yeah.
can actually make money from that.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, okay, so you're at the point where you're quitting your job. How did that benefit your business?
I'll be honest with you. When I quit my job, I actually worked the same number of hours on my businesses. It's just that the hours I was working for my job, I now kind of spend more time with the kids. Like right now during this interview, my kids are actually downstairs, and I'm probably just going to hang out with them after, and I can just kind of time shift my other stuff.
So it was more of a lifestyle upgrade than
Originally, I thought, wow, now I have 40 hours to work on my businesses. I'm going to be unstoppable. But I found that I can't really do 8 hours of sustained work in a day.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
I've kind of heard that before too. That really a lot of people just aren't wired even to work 8 hours. Like I think I read it was 4 hours or something like that. That is much more
Like the 4 hour
efficient.
work week?
Well, no, it's more like the 4 hour work day. The
Yeah.
idea that that's your most efficient time. You find that sort of perfect 4 hours, and it may not be 8 a.m, but and after that, people aren't really working. Like if someone's at a career, they're not really putting in 8 hours a day at work, right?
Yeah.
They're hanging out at the water cooler, and you need that time. It's not that it's not part of the overall picture, but
I mean, there's days where I crank and I'll work like straight, like maybe sometimes 12 hours without even eating. But those times are kind of rare. It's like only if I'm really into something and I'm in the zone.
yeah.
But for the most part, you're right. It's like 4 hours a day, probably. I work until lunchtime.
Yeah, and that seems so much more efficient. Like operating a business, so it does benefit your business that way, because those days that you do want to do that 12 hours, just because of momentum, hopefully not just because of deadlines, but because you're
What
actually
was
working through
what
something.
was funny is like when I had the job and I could work on my own stuff at the office, I used to crank because I just closed the door. I was in a different environment, and I had all this time. It was just peace and quiet. It was nice. Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of covered beginning to end with your story. What's some advice, like if someone's looking for a way to do something similar, maybe start a business that they hope to grow, what sort of steps could they take?
Yeah, I think it just depends on your time frames, really. I would say if you want to make money sooner rather than later, you have to sell something.
Mhm.
And so that's why when people come and ask me this question, like an e-commerce store makes a lot of sense because you're selling physical products and you're exchanging money. If you have a longer term time frame, I would say 3 to 5 years. Maybe blogging might be a better choice because you're just kind of slowly building up this audience who really trusts everything that you recommend, and then you can turn that into a more low energy business like selling digital products or doing affiliate marketing for that matter. So it really just depends on your goals. If you need money right away, like we did when we had our first child, selling physical products is probably the way to go.
And is there, I know you're in this area a lot. Is there a lot of room still for e-commerce? I know Amazon's been big, but that's also helping when you're selling on Amazon, of course, too. So is there still room for entry there?
Yeah, I mean, everyone asks me that question about every single type of business, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is always yes to everything. Things always get a little bit harder. You just have to find more creative ways of improving. Like Tom, we've been blogging for over a decade now, or almost a decade, for me at least, almost a decade. And
Same, yeah.
things change all the time, right? You got to worry about new social media rules. You got to worry about new SEO stuff. I mean, it's just kind of this constantly evolving process that you just have to learn about. And there's always room to grow, but you have to also constantly improve.
Yeah, and I suppose I know nothing about the e-commerce side, but I suppose it's no different than blogging in that,
Same exact thing.
yeah,
Same.
if you can bring something unique to it, then that might give you your sort of little niche where you can
Yeah, I mean
have.
that's the key. I mean the key is really just to stand out, and as long as you are doing something that allows your business to stand out, you'll probably be successful. The people that tend to fail are the people that just put up these cookie cutter things, or they don't have a strong value proposition, and those businesses are going to die.
Yeah. Have you ever had someone try to copy your business? Either one of them?
I have. Someone started hummingbird linens. So our store is bumblebee linens. Someone started hummingbird linens, and that store died off in like less than 6 months.
Yeah, perfect example then. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, uh, what else can someone do? Like say on the career side, if they're trying to build this side business and they're also managing a career, you've always been good at kind of making that all work. Plus, you've had kids, so you were
Yeah.
always in the exact same position as me, where you're trying to juggle these three things of family, career, and side hustle. Any advice for that?
Yeah. So back when I was working full time and working on these side hustles, I think the key thing to realize is that slow and steady is better than like bursty chunks. And so what I would do is I would come home from work and I would just set aside like 1 or 2 hours just to work on the business. And I would just do that every day. Uh, because if you try to just do everything all at once, you'll end up burning yourself out. But if you're on this schedule, it then just kind of becomes part of your routine and you don't even think about it anymore. And before you know it, months have passed by and you've made a tremendous amount of progress.
Yeah, so kind of keep taking those steps. Mine was similar too. I work my day job. I spend my time with my family. Then when the kids are going to sleep, then it's business time. I
Yep.
get in and
Yeah.
start working. Yeah.
Yeah. You just have to be willing to put a couple of extra hours in at night or on the weekends. You got to make a few sacrifices.
But it's so much more efficient than someone that spends all their evening watching TV and then they say they don't have any time to do this extra stuff. So is it that they kind of just have to find the time?
Yeah, I mean, I waste a lot of time early. I still do. Back then, I wasted even more time. It's just a matter of finding those things that you're doing that really don't have any intrinsic value. I classify watching TV as one of those things. So TV is probably the easiest thing to cut out. Just bumming around doing nothing is another thing. I don't know. I used to just waste a lot of time browsing sites that really didn't have any value.
Yeah, it's tough when you're working on an online business because you need to be on social media and things, but it seems like you can kind of just fall down the hole and before you know it, you wasted an hour on Twitter or YouTube or something.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook and YouTube are probably the biggest time sucks. So There are these plugins that'll just remove your feed altogether, so you're not tempted. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard that. I haven't been brave enough to try that because I still like the addiction of seeing everybody's latest status updates and everything.
So never complain to me, Tom, that you don't have enough time because I know how you're spending it.
Well, yeah, I admit I'm not as productive as I'd like to be. People always ask me, yeah, how do you do all this stuff? But I lose a lot of time for those same reasons. It's easy to get distracted and procrastinate, and why work on your business when you can watch a bunch of videos on YouTube. And at least with TV, you said it's easier to cut. I find that too, because at least with TV, it's more of a physical thing where you're sitting down in front of a TV and you're watching it. Mm-hmm. With social media, I try to go on there as part of my business, and then I get lost.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Is there any more tips you could give, maybe, especially towards this idea of balancing this both kinds of work and family and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think you should quit your job when you're starting your business. Some people like advise that you just go whole hog and you quit. One thing that, at least for me, I don't like having pressure to make money right away, and that's what quitting your job would tend to do. And the reason why I say that is because you don't want to be making business decisions based on money. Like, I'm going to go with this cheaper service because I want to save money, and we need to cut back. You want to make the right decisions. You want to have like a nest egg in place. So you either have to have a nest egg or you keep working your full-time job.
Yeah.
Because you want to be making the right decisions that will allow your business to be successful. You don't want to cheap out, basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Can you let everyone know where they can find you online?
Yeah. So if you want to find out more about the businesses that I run, my blog at mywifequitherjob.com is basically a diary of all my business exploits. And if you're going to get married, I can hook you up with some handkerchiefs over at bumblebellinens.com.
And you also have a course for someone if they are looking to sort of get into this e-commerce side.
Yeah, I run a training class over at profitableenlinestore.com. I also run an annual conference for e-commerce sellers at sellersummit.com. And I also run a podcast of the same name, My Wife Quit Her Job, where I just kind of bring on guests and we talk business.
Sounds like you need more things to do.
Actually, I got two more things, but we recently launched a new business. So I got all this time now, right? Since I'm done. So there's this other business called Go Brand Win. It's like a group giveaway service if you want to build your email list fast. And most recently, I just announced a brand new show called 5 Minute Pitch. And it's basically a Shark Tank-like show. We're hiring a professional video crew, and we're just putting out a show. So it should be fun.
That's great. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tom.
Thanks to Steve for sharing his entrepreneurial journey. And thank you for listening each week. It's what keeps me motivated to keep finding unique guests to come on the show and share what they know. You can find show notes for this episode at MapleMoney.com/Steve Chou. That's STEVECHOU. If you can think of someone that's looking to get into e-commerce, please share this episode with them. It will help them greatly on their path to creating an online store. And I'm always happy to have more listeners join the show.